In a forgotten corner of a sprawling valley, where the green hills rolled into an indifferent blue sky, a sound began. It was not a sound of nature, not the wind whistling through the tall grass or the call of a distant hawk. It was a sound of profound and desolate sorrow. A low, gut-wrenching cry that carried on the breeze, a mournful echo of a life in its final, agonizing chapters. For days, it persisted. The source was a bull, a creature of immense power and forgotten majesty, now left for dead in a dusty, overgrown pasture. A gash on its flank, deep and angry, festered under the relentless sun. Its massive body, once a symphony of muscle and might, was now just a geography of pain. The adults in the nearby town heard the cries. They were a nuisance, a grim reminder of something they'd rather ignore. They closed their windows a little tighter, turned their radios up a little louder. To them, it was just an animal, a problem for someone else to solve, a beast succumbing to the harsh laws of the wild. But a young boy named Leo heard it differently. He didn't hear a nuisance. He heard a plea. He didn't see a beast. He saw a being trapped in a prison of pain. And one sun-drenched afternoon, while the world looked away, Leo did the unthinkable. He crawled under the rusted wire of the fence, a barrier not just of metal, but of fear and prejudice. He went to sit beside the wounded giant, and in doing so, began a story that would leave everyone who heard it speechless. Leo was a quiet observer in a world that moved too fast and talked too loud. He was a boy of soft edges and deep feelings, more comfortable with the silent language of the clouds than the clipped, certain sentences of adults. While other children chased balls and each other, Leo chased butterflies and the shifting patterns of light on the ground. His parents, loving and kind, sometimes worried about his stillness, his tendency to get lost in a world only he seemed to see. When the bulls' cries began to haunt the edges of their property, they did what everyone else did. They tried to block it out. They told Leo to stay away from the back pasture. "It's a dangerous animal, sweetheart," his mother would say, her voice laced with a genuine protective fear. "We don't know why it's there, but you must not go near it." But her words were like stones, skipping over the surface of a deep lake. They couldn't penetrate the depths of what Leo was feeling. He would sit by his bedroom window, the glass cool against his forehead, and watch the distant, dark shape in the field. He didn't see danger. He saw an island of loneliness in a sea of green. The sound that reached him wasn't a roar of aggression, but a vibration of pure misery that resonated with something deep inside his own quiet heart. He felt its loneliness as if it were his own. He watched the adults' cars drive past, their faces turned away. He watched the older kids from town dare each other to get close to the fence, only to run away laughing, their bravery a hollow performance. No one was listening, and as the days wore on, the cries began to change. They grew weaker, thinner, frayed at the edges. It was the sound of a flame sputtering, of a life preparing to be extinguished. And for Leo, that was a silence he could not bear. The decision wasn't a conscious thought. It was an impulse that bloomed from his heart, a silent, powerful command. One afternoon, the air thick and heavy with unspoken tragedy, Leo knew he couldn't just watch from his window any longer. Hope, he sensed, was running out. He slipped out the back door, his small sneakers making no sound on the dry soil. The world seemed to hold its breath. The cicadas paused their humming chorus. The wind died down. There was only the sun on his back and the weak, intermittent moan from the field. The fence was a formidable line, a declaration of separation. Its barbs were like teeth, rusted and sharp. To the world, it was a boundary protecting them from the beast. To Leo, it was a wall keeping compassion out. He dropped to his knees, the dry earth puffing up around him. He felt the familiar prickle of fear, the echo of his mother's warnings. But the sound from the bull, a low, desperate sigh, pulled him forward. He wriggled his small body underneath the lowest strand of wire. A barb caught the back of his shirt, tearing a small hole. He felt a sharp scratch against his skin, a tiny sting of his own, a small price for this trespass. Once on the other side, the world felt different, wilder. The air smelled of dust and manure, and something metallic and sick, the smell of the wound. He stood up, a small, solitary figure, in a vast, forbidden territory. The bull was only 50 yards away. It was bigger up close, impossibly so. A mountain of dark fur and dormant power. Its head was down, its horns like polished daggers buried in the dirt. Every line of its body screamed defeat. Leo took a step, then another. His heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic drumbeat in the immense quiet. He wasn't armed with anything but a desperate, unexplainable empathy. He was just a boy, walking toward a wounded giant, armed with the revolutionary idea that it deserved kindness. The bull, a colossal creature named Kale by a farmer who had long since forgotten him, felt the vibrations in the earth, a new presence. He lifted his massive head, an act that sent a blinding wave of pain through his body. His one good eye, clouded with infection and despair, swiveled to find the source. He saw the boy, small, frail, a threat. Every instinct, honed by a life of dominance and survival, screamed caution. Humans were the source of his pain, the ones who had driven him here, the ones who had abandoned him. A tremor of rage, weak but still present, rumbled deep in his chest. He could end this small creature with a single, tired heave of his body. But then he saw the boy's eyes. There was no aggression there, no mockery, no casual cruelty. There was only a calm, deep sadness, a reflection of his own. The boy stopped about 10 feet away, his hands held open at his sides, a gesture of peace. He didn't speak. He just stood there, breathing, waiting, watching. For Kale, who had only known the world as a place of challenges and threats, this was an entirely new language. It was a language of stillness, of shared presence. He saw no weapon, heard no command. The boy was simply there. Leo, his fear slowly dissolving into a profound and sorrowful awe, took one more step. He knelt in the dirt, bringing himself lower, making himself smaller. He saw the swarm of flies around the wound, the dried blood matted in the thick dark fur. He saw the ragged rise and fall of the bull's breathing. With a hand that trembled like a leaf in the wind, he reached out, not for the wound, but for the solid, living shoulder next to it. He laid his palm flat against the coarse hair. At the touch, Kale's entire body went rigid. A low growl rumbled in his throat, but the hand didn't recoil. It stayed. It was warm. It was gentle. And then the bull did something that defied all logic. He let out a long, shuddering sigh, and for the first time in days, the tension in his mighty neck eased, just a fraction. He didn't just allow the touch, he leaned into it. That first touch was a bridge. It spanned the chasm between two worlds, the world of human logic and the world of animal suffering. And in the days that followed, Leo crossed that bridge again and again. His visits became a secret ritual, a sacred appointment kept between a boy and a bull. He would sneak out each afternoon, no longer with fear, but with purpose. He started bringing supplies. The first was a red plastic bucket, filled with fresh, cool water from the hose in his backyard. He'd lug it across the field, his small arms straining, and place it near Kale's head. The bull, who had been too weak to reach the murky trough at the far end of the pasture, drank deeply, his great throat working, his eyes never leaving the boy. Then Leo brought an old cloth. He'd dip it in the bucket and, with infinite gentleness, begin to clean the edges of the wound. At first, Kale would flinch, the muscles in his flank twitching with pain. But Leo would speak to him, his voice a low, soothing murmur. He didn't use many words, just sounds. "It's okay. I'm here. It's okay." He wasn't a veterinarian. He had no medical knowledge. But he had something more fundamental, the instinct of compassion. He cleaned away the dirt and the flies, his small, careful movements a stark contrast to the violence that had caused the injury. He would sit for hours, sometimes reading a book aloud, his back pressed against Kale's solid, warm side. The bull's breathing, once shallow and ragged, began to deepen, to find a slow, steady rhythm that matched the boy's calm presence. The light started to return to Kale's eyes. He began to anticipate the sound of Leo's footsteps, the sight of his small frame appearing at the edge of the field. The bond between them solidified in the quiet afternoon heat, a friendship forged not in words, but in shared stillness and a radical act of trust. Have you ever felt a worry so deep it becomes a physical weight in your chest? That was the world Leo's mother, Sarah, was living in. She noticed the changes in her son, the torn shirt, the faint smell of hay and earth that clung to him, the way his long, silent afternoons seemed to fill him with a quiet sense of peace she hadn't seen in him before. But she also noticed the red bucket missing from the garden and the old rags gone from the utility closet. Her maternal alarm, a finely tuned instrument, began to sound. The official story was that Leo was building a fort in the woods behind their house, but the explanation felt thin, translucent. The fear she had for the bull in the pasture, a distant, abstract threat, was now connecting with the immediate, visceral love she had for her son. One afternoon, her worry finally boiled over. She followed him. She stayed far enough behind that he wouldn't notice, her heart pounding with a mix of dread and determination. She watched him duck under the barbed wire fence with a practiced ease that made her stomach clench. He was going in there. He was going toward the beast. She nearly screamed his name, ready to rush forward and pull him back to safety. But something stopped her, an instinct to wait, to see. She crept closer to the fence line, hiding behind a thicket of overgrown bushes, and then she saw it. The scene was so impossible, so contrary to every law of nature and parental fear, that for a moment she thought she was dreaming. Her son, her small, quiet Leo, was not just near the bull. He was sitting beside it, his head of sandy hair resting against the creature's massive, scarred flank. The bull was not just tolerating him, it was protecting him. Its great head was turned, its body curled slightly around the boy's, creating a safe harbor of flesh and bone. The red bucket was by its side. In Leo's hand was a cloth, and he was gently patting the animal's face. The sight broke something open in her. The fear that had been strangling her heart cracked, and through the fissure poured a wave of pure, unadulterated wonder. Word of a boy taming a wounded bull travels fast in a small town, especially when that word comes from a mother whose voice trembles with a mixture of residual fear and newfound awe. The story rippled through the community, whispered over coffee cups and across checkout counters. It was met mostly with disbelief, a child's fantasy, a mother's exaggeration. But curiosity is a powerful force. Soon, a small crowd would gather by the fence line in the late afternoons, keeping a safe distance, their phone cameras raised. They saw what Sarah had seen, the small boy and the giant beast, existing in a pocket of impossible peace. The skepticism, however, soon took an official form. It arrived in a dusty pickup truck, driven by a man named Henderson, a local rancher and part-time animal control officer. He was a man of practicality, his face weathered by sun and cynicism. He saw animals as livestock, as assets or liabilities. A wounded, abandoned bull was a liability. He marched up to the fence, his boots crunching on the dry ground, and sized up the situation with a dismissive squint. "This is ridiculous," he said to Sarah, who was standing there, a nervous guardian of her son's miracle. "That's a half-ton of unpredictable muscle. It's got an injury that's likely turned septic. The fact that it hasn't gored your boy yet is a fluke, a ticking time bomb." He saw no bond, only risk. He saw no healing, only infection. His solution was simple, clean, and final. "It needs to be put down," he stated, not as a suggestion, but as a declaration of fact. It's the humane thing to do, for the animal and for the safety of this community. His words hung in the air, cold and heavy. A death sentence delivered with the casual authority of someone who had long ago stopped looking for magic in the world. The day Henderson returned, the sky was a sheet of pale, washed-out gray. He wasn't alone. He had a veterinarian with him, a man whose face was just as grim and pragmatic. In the back of the truck was a winch, and in the vet's bag was a syringe filled with a chemical that promised a quiet, efficient end. They represented the world of rules and regulations, the world that had no column for a friendship between a boy and a bull. Leo was already in the field with Kael, sensing the shift in the atmosphere. He saw the men at the fence. He didn't know the exact purpose of their visit, but he felt the threat radiating from them like heat off asphalt. Kael felt it too. The bull, who had been resting peacefully, tensed. A low rumble started in his chest. "Son, you need to come out of there now," Henderson called, his voice stripped of any warmth. "We're here to take care of the animal." Leo stood up. He was small, his clothes dusty, but his posture was resolute. He shook his head. "No," he said, his voice quiet but clear. "You're not hurting him." He took a step forward, positioning his small body directly between Kael and the men. He became a human shield. It was a gesture of such startling, defiant love that it silenced the small crowd that had gathered. Henderson sighed, frustrated. "Don't be a fool, kid. Step aside." It was then that the miracle solidified into an undeniable truth. Kael, with a groan that seemed to tear up from the very center of the earth, began to push himself up. His legs, weak for so long, trembled under the strain. But he rose. First to his front knees, then, with a mighty effort, to all 4 feet. He was unsteady, but he was standing. He moved slowly, deliberately, until he was right behind Leo, his massive head lowered just over the boy's shoulder. He was no longer a victim. He was a guardian. He let out a bellow, not the sound of pain they had grown used to, but a full-throated roar of power and protection. It was a sound that said, "This boy is mine. You will not pass." The standoff was absolute. The image was seared into the minds of everyone watching. The small, unmoving boy and the colossal, unwavering bull. A single, united front against the cold logic of the world. Henderson and the vet were frozen, their plans and certainties dissolving in the face of this impossible display of loyalty. They saw it then. It wasn't a fluke. It wasn't a time bomb. It was a bond, as real and strong as the fence posts driven into the earth. The vet slowly lowered his bag. Henderson took a step back, his cynicism finally punctured by a shard of pure wonder. The aggression drained from the scene, replaced by a stunned, respectful silence. The first vet, humbled and out of his depth, made a call. An hour later, a different kind of vehicle arrived. It was a mobile clinic from a large animal rescue sanctuary, 2 counties over. The woman who stepped out was Dr. Eris Thorne. She had kind eyes and a slow, deliberate way of moving that put everyone and every animal at ease. She didn't approach with tools and threats. She approached with respect. She spoke to Leo first. "I hear you've made a very special friend," she said, her voice gentle. Leo, still standing guard, simply nodded. Dr. Thorne spent the next hour just observing from the fence line, talking quietly with Leo's mother, learning the story. She saw the way Kael relaxed when Leo spoke to him, the way the bull's eyes followed the boy's every move. "The greatest medicine that bull has received," she finally said to Sarah, "is your son. The will to live, you can't inject that with a syringe." With Leo's permission, and with him standing by Kael's side the entire time, she was able to approach. She saw that, while the wound was serious, it wasn't hopeless. With proper care, and with a powerful psychological boost from his friendship with Leo, Kael could recover. The community, once passive observers, was now galvanized. Henderson, his perspective permanently shifted, organized a collection. People who had once closed their windows to the sound of Kael's pain now brought bags of feed, bales of hay, and money for his medical care. The fence was no longer a barrier to keep people out. It had become a gathering place, a testament to a connection that had healed not just a bull, but a town's indifference. The healing was a slow, beautiful dance. Under Dr. Thorne's guidance, and with the entire town's support, Kael began a true recovery. The festering wound was cleaned and stitched, the infection treated with powerful antibiotics that Dr. Thorne could only administer because Leo was there, his calming presence keeping the giant animal still. The real healing, though, was happening on a deeper level. Kael's body, nourished by fresh food and clean water, began to rebuild its lost strength. His coat, once dull and matted, began to regain its dark, healthy sheen. But it was his spirit that transformed most dramatically. The despair was gone from his eyes, replaced by a soft, intelligent light. He would spend his days grazing peacefully, but he was always aware of Leo. The boy's visits were no longer secret missions but celebrated events. Leo would finish his homework and head out to the pasture, where Kyle would greet him with a soft nuzzle. The story became a modern fable, a source of local pride. News crews came and went, but the core of the story remained: the boy and his bull in their quiet field. Eventually, Kyle was fully healed, a magnificent, powerful creature once more. The question of his future loomed. He couldn't stay in the overgrown pasture forever. The farmer who owned the land, tracked down and shamed by the community's newfound conscience, readily signed him over. It was Dr. Thorne's sanctuary that offered him a permanent home, a sprawling green haven for rescued animals. The day they moved him was bittersweet. A state-of-the-art trailer arrived. Leo walked with Kale the entire way, his hand resting on the bull's side, guiding him up the ramp not with force, but with trust. There was no fear, only a calm transition to a new life. The final scene was not one of ending, but of beautiful continuation. Weeks later, Leo and his parents visited the sanctuary. As they approached a vast green meadow, a familiar, powerful form separated from a herd and trotted toward the fence. It was Kale. He came to Leo, lowering his head for the boy's touch. The fence between them now was not a barrier of fear, but simply a gate, one that Leo was always welcome to open. They stood there as the sun began to set, casting long, golden shadows across the grass. The transformation was complete. A bull, condemned by injury and indifference, was redeemed by a child's empathy. A quiet boy, who felt the world too deeply, found his voice not in words, but in a courageous act of kindness that showed everyone the profound, world-changing power of simply being present. What if the deepest wounds aren't the ones we can see? And what if the most powerful healing comes not from a place of strength, but from the simple, brave choice to sit with another being in their pain and listen?